Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for today's LexisNexis ReadTech Customer Exclusive webinar, Understanding Drug Reporting Requirements under the CARES Act. Just a couple of quick logistics for today's webinar. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the GoToWebinar platform. If you attend our webinars regularly, I'm sure you are. But during the meeting, we are recording, so everyone in the audience is muted. However, we'd still love to hear from you. If you have any questions, please utilize the chat box. And we're going to have a little Q&A session at the end of our presentation today. And of course, if you have any technical difficulties, please also send a message, and I will try to help you resolve that just as quickly and efficiently as possible. As always, we will be sending a link to the webinar as well as the slides after today's webinar, either today or tomorrow. For today's presentation, we are really lucky to have two of our ReadTech subject matter experts with us. Gary Saner is our Senior Regulatory Principal of Life Sciences, and Andrew Ethridge is our Product Manager of Global Labeling Solutions here at ReadTech. Today, Gary and Andrew are going to cover the CARES Act report overview, requirements of the CARES Act report, the timing that we're seeing right now for the CARES Act report, our ReadTech solution to help you all get through this process, and as I mentioned, a live Q&A session. So with that, I will hand the presentation off to Gary, and hopefully you can get us kicked off.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. Andrew and I are quite excited about sharing this information and various updates that have been occurring and the timelines in place and so on. Before we get into the ReadTech solution, I'll cover some of the basic requirements as Aaron had mentioned, and then Andrew will follow up with really a high-level overview and description of our services to help solve this new requirement that the FDA has put in place, and yet another requirement, right? So, yeah. We'll take a quick look here at what the reporting overview is. The documentation, there's two primary documents that you should be familiar with. One is the CARES Act, so that's the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Yeah, it's a real handful, but the CARES Act put many things in place and probably didn't catch too much media attention. You're probably not aware of it, but inside that CARES Act there was a clause that added the requirement for drug manufacturers to report annual production amounts to the FDA. So this CARES Act amended the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act, but interesting, there was no due dates that were embedded with that particular act. And then over the course of time, there were some documents that came out. The various guidance for industries came out, draft versions, some technical versions. The most recent one that's in effect now came out in February, and that has a lot of good description about the particular responsibility and how you go about preparing the report and making the submission. So this particular guidance document, and again, there's others, there's a technical guide document and so on, but we now know who is involved, and that would be the registrant that lists the drug product. Contract manufacturer organizations would be part of this list. They may delegate to a private label distributor, but that would be the exception. Legally, they're responsible as the CMO. What needs to be reported? Well, this is the production amounts that are manufactured, prepared, propagated, compounded, or processed, including repacking and relabeling. And when? Well, this has to be on an annual basis, and we'll talk more about the timing. There's a lot of questions about what is in scope. Well, what are the details? I have a drug that's listed on Daily Med, for example. Do I need to report the amounts, production amounts for that particular drug product? Well, in general, the broad statement is assume that you have to report the amount. It's quite a broad scope of drugs that are included. So all the human, biologic, and animal drug products. Now there's some other specials out there, medical gases, homeopathic products, and other listed products. They're all in scope. This would include both prescription and over-the-counter. And in various forms, we'll talk a little bit more detail about this, but if you have a listed drug product, it would include all the way from some APIs that you may manufacture to some dosage forms. It's not in a final product package as of yet, but it exists as a dosage form. They need to be included, and well as the products that have a finished package form and ready for commercial distribution. There are a few exceptions out of scope. So there in the law, there's a couple exceptions that the FDA has acted upon. There's a federal order that discusses biologic exceptions for two very specialized scenarios: blood and blood components for transfusion, and the cell and gene therapy products. So there's actually some other reporting going on with those particular exceptions, but those are quite the anomaly. For most all your listed products, you can assume that this CARES Act report does apply. Now there might be some business operations that you have to consider. There ones listed here: manufacturer, API manufacturer, and so on. They're all in scope, and in some cases you will default to the manufacturer, but if your operations is not totally relevant, then you do have that exception that you can build upon. But again, those anomalies and exceptions are very, very small, and most products, overwhelming majority, are in scope. So what has to be done? What are the requirements? What goes into this report? So the report has some structure, and it's a hierarchy that you should be familiar with. The reports are based on production years. So for a particular year, you need to organize the amounts based upon the registered establishments that you might have. So you might have a site in Philadelphia, Atlanta, and San Francisco. So for each of those registered establishment sites, you'll need to collect data by the business operation. So you need to break it down by the business operation. So you might be doing manufacturing or repacking or API, all at the same establishment. And then organize the data by every individual listed product down to the NDC code, and then report the production amounts by month. So it's quite granular. There's a lot of detail. If we take a look at it, at an example, I have a graphical view here of what your portfolio might look like. So this is just for one establishment. Let's say it's the site in Atlanta that you have a business operation, you manufacture there. So under the manufacturing operation, maybe you manufacture pills and put them into a bottle. So that's your -31 NDC code. You might also put two bottles in a box, and then you might put 4 boxes in a case. So there are some requirements for reporting innermost and outermost packaging levels in this hierarchy. So your bottle would be the innermost, and in this case, the case would be the outermost. Now, if we go over to another, maybe a different strength product, you still put those into bottles, and you might have the same hierarchy. As well, moving over to a different business operation. So in addition to manufacture, you might also have some APIs that are manufactured and commercially distributed. Now you report that information in the drum container. And yet there may be a third business operation, relabel. So, a different NDC number for that drum and the blister pack respectively. So this could get a little bit complicated when you think about all the different products and the variations that you make, the strengths, the formulations, the business operations, and your different establishment sites. So anyway, that's the hierarchy that the organization needs to be put in place. I might use the word structure. This is what I'm talking about, the structure of your portfolio. The next question that comes up typically is, how do I go about reporting this? The FDA has expanded the capability inside the NextGen portal. So this is a portal that's been used for other functions, but now it also serves as a website where you can report your CARES Act report. So one option is to make manual entry. It does have a web interface, web forms, where you can go in and build that structure that we talked about, and then add the quantities as necessary. The other option is to build a comma-separated values file, CSV file, offline, and process that, and then just simply do an upload. So that is your options. There's two options there. One, the manual entry is a lot of time and effort, on the website. If many times there's advantages in using a spreadsheet. So a lot of copy, paste, fill the list down. A lot of efficiencies are able to be exercised by using a spreadsheet, but then there are some particulars that you ought to be aware of when you create the comma-separated values file. So that is a way to save that spreadsheet file into CSV. But there are some details about that. Now, the actual data elements that need to be reported, there's information about the submitter, first name, last name, and phone number, and so on, what company. The submitter can actually be a third party. So ReTech would act as a third party submitter for our clients. And that's certainly illegal, and that's okay to have that happen. The submission does include some metadata about the actual report itself. So you need to identify whether you're the actual registrant for this product, or are you the agent? So if ReTech was doing the submission, we would be the agent. If you were to make a submission as a manufacturer, then obviously the registrant. Do need to identify the reporting year. So there's many years that we need to talk about, some retroactive years actually. And then identify the submission method. And then as of 2024 in February, the template for reporting this information was further clarified and broken down into not one template, but 3 different templates. So the 2024 guidance now identifies a finished package form, a not finished package form. Typically that would be like a dosage form. And then the third template is for APIs, those active pharmaceutical ingredients, and in the case that they're mixed with some inactive ingredients. So now, not only do we have to go through that structure and figure out, all the different types of data and the, the various granulations, if you will, for each of those different scenarios, then now we also have to identify the particular template that you would use. The FDA has some information, and it was kind of like just repackaged here to for our particular use, where you can work through a workflow to identify the particular type of report. So first of all, is the reporting for a drug product, yes or no? If it's yes, then very simple question, is it in the finished package form, yes or no? And then you end up with finished package form or not finished package form where you report the dosage form units. And if it's not a drug product as of yet, it may be sitting in a very early stage in API. Yes, and then you select the API report. Now, if it doesn't match any of those scenarios, then a report is not required. So you kind of work your way through this. And it would not be too uncommon to actually, for an establishment to have multiple reports that need to be completed. So if there's some manufacturing and API manufacturing taking place at the same site, then or even different sites, you as a manufacturer would be engaged with multiple templates. Now, I did want to touch on the particular attributes. And on the left-hand side is the current attributes, 1 through 12, that are collected, and that pretty much reflects the hierarchy and the structure that we talked about before. Prior to 2024, if you submitted some data, and it was open for voluntary submissions, if you submitted data based on the 2021 tech guide, all those 12 fields are the same, except for 3 label changes, just minor label changes, word from volume per to amount per, or manufactured from at least, that sort of thing. But the last one, the 12th one, is quite different. In the 2021 guide, there was a question whether yes or no, whether the market was known or unknown. And that was to indicate, if you're doing some outside U.S. distributions. And that particular report, now, already submitted, let's say, yes or no. But as of today, using the new 2024 guide, that question number 12, or field number 12, is a different type of question. The question is intended to fulfill the 21 CFR 314.81 requirement. That particular Code of Federal Regulation refers to the annual report that approved products, such as your NDA or BLA or ANDA, they have ongoing annual reporting requirements. And inside that report, there's distribution data that has been in place. The CARES report is an alternative to putting that distribution data in your annual report. So it's actually more granular and has a lot more information. So you're required to submit a CARES report. So the nice thing about it is you can use the CARES report to satisfy the requirement of the distribution data in your annual report. So you need to indicate that, though, when you do the CARES report. So yes or no, Boolean question. Interestingly, field number 12 in both these reports is a Boolean yes or no, but the title in the context is quite different. I'm not aware that any old data that was previously submitted under 2021 needs to be corrected or updated. We'll let you know if we become aware of that. All right, so let's move on to a comparison of the 3 different data templates. So the template on the left is the list that we were just looking at for a finished package form, items 1 through 12 there. But you notice there are some gaps and some different labels, different titles for the data that is collected under the dosage form, the center column. Some things are common in the front, first 5, 6 fields, and then what is different is actually in the 8th field. So when you're reporting the outermost package type for the first column, now you need to report the dosage form. When you go to the column on the right, this is the 3rd template targeted for APIs. Some common fields in the beginning, and then you need to report the amount. There are some fields there's actually 3 fields that are relative to something called activity. So the activity unit of measure, the average activity, and the minimum activity. There's some footnotes there, and that indicates that those particular fields only need to be used if that API is formulated by an activity and makes use of this U particular identifier. So there's some anomalies using the API, but that's where RETEC can come in and help explain these particular fields and make sure that the appropriate template is selected for your particular portfolio. This next little section that I'll touch on is the timing, and everybody wants to know what do I have to do, and more importantly, when do I have to do it? So to summarize some of the information about the timing, already mentioned that your production report needs to be submitted ongoing every year, and it reports the production data for a full calendar year. And that may not be necessarily your fiscal year, but for the calendar year, January 1 through December 31 is the reporting time period. And we now understand the various due dates. So this is retroactive 2020, 2021, and 2022. For those calendar production years, the FDA says those are still required, even though time has marched on, and they should be submitted to the agency as soon as possible. So there's not a due date, a hard due date for those old retro years, but it's something that, and it may be actually very difficult to go back and collect the production amounts. We're talking now, 4 years ago, to collect all that information. So this is on your to-do list if it's not already done. Those 3 years, we'll call those the legacy years. But the next row is for the production that was for last year, 2023. And there was a due date just now a few weeks ago, July 31st. So that due date is that's the first hard due date that has come out with the CARES report. And if you had not submitted then, obviously you want to move ahead and complete that. I'm not aware of any fines or warning letters or anything that has been generated by the FDA, but technically you want to take care of the 2023 data and report that as soon as possible if you're not already done so. And then I would turn my attention back to the retro years, 2020, 2021, 2022. Going forward, there's a schedule due date of March 31st of the following year for all the years following. So let's take a look at this on a calendar. Sometimes a little bit easier to understand. Back in February, there's this mention that if the CARES Act for those legacy years were not already submitted, take care of that as soon as possible. Here's the deadline that I was talking about, just now a couple weeks old, where 2023 data needs to be reported. And then the schedule is uniform thereafter. Every March 31st, report the CARES Act for the previous calendar year. Aaron, I think I'm going to stop here, and I believe you have a poll that asks the audience to report where they are and whether or not they have completed some of these reports as of yet. So why don't we do that now?
Okay, Gary. So you kind of just described the question for me, so I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. After, we went through the timeline, we were interested in what years you guys still need to submit the reports on. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute and just checking all that apply. We have 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and of course, if you've already submitted all of your years, good on you for, being ahead of the curve. So we'll leave this open for just a few more seconds and give everyone a chance to answer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and just quickly share the results with everyone. So it really looks like we have quite a split here, and possibly a lot of folks need some help with the earlier years. Gary, probably to your point that information is a little tricky to find right now. So, you know, if you guys need help doing that, certainly give us a call here at Reed Tech, and we're happy to help you as best we can. So with that, let's move on with the presentation.
All right, very good. So there looks like some, certainly those in the audience need to do some reports. We do have a couple comments about preparing the report and actually making the submission. There is like a 4-step plan that we would recommend. One is to create that environment, meaning make sure you have the stakeholders coming from regulatory as well as manufacturing. So this is going to be a team effort, and not all the information is in one department or the other. There has to be some synergy between the two departments for this particular report to be generated. Making sure that you are familiar with the structure, identify those particular establishments, build that full structure, that hierarchy, get your NDCs in place, determine you know, which particular types of reports you need to generate, and then once you have a structure in place, you'll need to go back and contact the manufacturing people and say, can you fill in our quantity gaps here? So having that hierarchy is the second step, with all the different buckets of data down to the month, and then collecting those production counts from the manufacturing, and then building and actually submitting the report. So this is a new function in your business. Not previously required, so it's going to take you know, some synergy to work between the two different departments, regulatory and manufacturing. There may be some repositories of this information. There's manufacturing execution systems, there's ERP systems, some of the other systems where the actual data counts would be stored need to be combined with the, you know, the regulatory structure of your particular portfolio. But then once you do have that data, there's some tasks to validate it, actually build the report, submit the report to the next gen portal at the FDA, and then make sure you record and those results. Keep all that confirmation available, and then have that ready for next year, for the next production year. Now, there are some nuances when you go about working with this particular data set. And I'm just going to use the finished package file as an example, but most of these comments would be reflective to the two other templates as well. This is a sample FDA report, but one thing that the FDA cautions, and I've experienced it numerous times, when you have a CSV file and you open it up under Excel, the leading zeros in a particular number field are dropped. So, and it might be legitimate that you have a leading zero in establishment or maybe even your NDC number, and now you have that zero dropped from the data set, which is going to be an error. So there are some special techniques to make sure that these come in as text fields and you handle those. So a little bit of an issue there. Once you get the procedure in place, it's okay. But you know, if a new person takes a look at this and starts to take over, it's going to be a challenge to make sure they get it right. The business operation field, there's only a few controlled vocabulary items in this list. And manufacturer is obviously one of them, API manufacturer and some others. But in some cases, there's a recommendation to pick the one that's most appropriate for this particular site. And it's always caused a little bit of confusion because sometimes in your SPL listing, you might have a manufacturer and establishment that has multiple business operations, and like, what is the best one? This is where we can help you out at RETEC here and drive you to pick the proper business operation. I caution you when you build your portfolio in that structure not to rely on the Daily Med, because there's some SPLs that are not published in the Daily Med. You might have listed and those, so they're in scope, but now they're not on Daily Med. So, some of these CMO, SPLs, might be some APIs and so on. Anyway, don't rely on the published information at the Daily Med, because it's probably not, well, it is not a complete set of everything that you need to report. The source NDC, this would be a scenario where you pull in, purchase an NDC that's commercially distributed, and then you perform a repack or relabel operation on that particular product. In that scenario, you need to report what the NDC number was, and then obviously you would change that to your NDC under the NDC column. But again, there's a little bit of explanation here, and there's some fields that need to be considered, and there's others that you could skip over. Now, in the event that you do make use of the CARES report to fulfill the 21 CFR 314.81 annual report, the distribution amount there, then any quantities that you distribute outside the U.S. need to be reported. So that is a dedicated column for those products that are distributed outside the U.S. Another little thing to make sure of is that you answer properly the intended to fulfill question at the end here, whether or not you're using this CARES Act as an alternative to your distribution amount in your annual report. And yet there's one more item that I'll touch on. It's a little bit of a nuance. The way the FDA handles human drugs reporting is different than the way they handle animal drug reporting. So in regards to the CMO, for a human drug, the CMO is responsible to report CMO NDC counts and the PLD, the private label distributor NDC counts, and need to report them separately. So yeah, I know it sounds like double reporting, but that's the way the FDA wants it recorded. And that rule is different than the way the animal drug products are handled. So in this case, animal drugs, for animal drug CMOs, only need to report the private label distributor NDC numbers and not their own CMO count. So having an understanding of this can be quite daunting, and as things change, you have to keep updates on the particular rules and regulations. That's where RETEC comes into play. So I know I talked a lot about the regulations and the requirements and so on. I'd like to switch over to Andrew now and have him present the RETEC solution to help ease this pain of pulling the structure together. There's some very nice benefits of using RETEC to have that happen, where that structure can be built, and then taking care of some validation and the actual submission. So Andrew, why don't you give us now some of the details about the RETEC solution for the CARES Act?
My pleasure, and thank you, Gary, so much for all that great information into the overview, history, details, and timelines for the CARES Act reporting. Feel free to take a sip of water now after going on for 36 minutes. But I will focus on how we are supporting the CARES Act reporting. So if we go to the next slide. So we support this in a few different ways. The first is through regulatory consultation. So being able to leverage myself, Gary Saner, and many of our other experts who have been supporting FDA reporting for going on 20 years now when it comes to SPL submissions for drug listings, establishment registrations, and the like. This is just one more requirement that many of our customers are being asked to complete, whether you're in the quality area or regulatory. So we would work with our customers to provide consultation on their unique portfolio and setup to help them identify which reports of the three they would need to support annually and help collect that information. And that gets to the next piece, which is the data collection. So without any automation, you would be filling out a Excel spreadsheet to then convert into the CSV required format that follows the FDA's template. What many of our customers are doing now, though, is they're leveraging a subscription model of support that stores and manages their entire product portfolio in a single location, and we're able to tap into that content to pre-populate CARES Act report forms. And we also support other companies with actually getting into their systems to help extract raw data from the ERP to capture not just the packaging and product and establishment information, but also the quantity information. Once that CSV is created, we offer the build and validation and spot checking of that report to make sure that many of those common issues like leading zeros and the like are avoided and resolved, up to and including the actual upload or dispatch to the FDA's next-gen portal on behalf of our customers, monitoring that submission, making sure it has been accepted, or troubleshooting any errors if they do arise. If we look at the next slide, this is just a simple graphic to kind of show how we can become that new function or solution to support the CARES Act reporting, where we offer that consultation in terms of understanding the templates, creating the baseline report that you would then combine with your quantity information. We then take it, validate it, build the report, and perform the submission, and then store that report and provide you with documentation that it has been accepted. If we look at the next slide, it's just here's kind of an example of the finished package report where we have highlighted in red all the fields that would be populated from that product portfolio, leveraging the technology that we're now offering to our customers. Going on to the next. This is the standard process of how you would work with RETEC and how we would support you with the CARES Act. So we would work with you to set up your portfolio inside of our technology platform called Single Source for Drug Products. When we do the kickoff and onboarding session, placing that request for the CARES Act report, we would provide a template or more with your specific portfolio information. You would then complete that form and template, basically mapping your quantity information into that template. We would then perform the validation check, quality checks on that report before uploading to the FDA and providing that confirmation of acceptance. So I talked briefly about how this is supported in our new model of support, where you are probably familiar with our SPL services that is now being offered in a technology platform within single source for drug products. We are offering this as a single subscription to cover all of the SPL services, as well as new CARES Act reporting support and other necessary SPL services, whether you might have biologics that require a lot distribution report or other unique SPL services would be packaged together inside of a single subscription. So this is going to provide a improved ability to plan your budgeting. It allows you to request training as needed, starting with the implementation, training on drug listings and CARES Act reporting, as well as other access to myself, Gary, and other experts. The portal facilitates order management, so you now have all of your historic orders archived, capturing all the artifacts like any Word documents or PDFs connected to the actual SPL label files that have been created through that service. So this is our new improved model of supporting the pharmaceutical consumer industries with SPL services packaged with CARES Act reporting support. And I believe, Aaron, you might have another poll. We would love to connect with each and every one of you to kind of demonstrate this new model, leveraging the single source for drug products application in support of CARES Act reporting and our other services.
Yep, thank you so much, Drew. Yeah, so this is an easy question, guys. I'll just leave it up for a few seconds. Would you like to be contacted to schedule a single source demo with our team? So yes, no, or I do know some folks on this webinar are current single source customers, so we included that as a choice as well. So it looks like we are still getting a few answers coming in, so give me just a second, and then I will go ahead and close it. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up today's webinar with our Q&A. Gary and Drew, thank you for such a wealth of information. I think that this was really helpful in clearing up some questions around the CARES Act reports that I had at least. So hopefully our customers agree. We did have quite a few audience questions come in. Some were very specific to certain customers. In that case, I will have my team reach out to you directly. But hopefully we can cover some of the ones that I think will be important for everyone on the call today. Very briefly, Gary or Drew, I guess we kind of jumped the gun on this one a little bit. We did have a question come in. If you could just very briefly explain what SPL is.
Yes, so SPL is structured product labeling. So it is a file format of a extensible markup language or XML file. It's a standard that was developed by a standards organization, Health Level 7, to facilitate machine-to-machine communication to more easily populate databases and other systems with important information. So the FDA adopted SPL, or Structured Product Labeling, back in 2005 initially to support prescription drug labels. And since then, it has evolved into supporting other electronic types of registrations like establishment registrations, labeler code requests, and lot distribution reports. And beyond the FDA even, Health Canada is adopting SPL as well for their product monograph labels. So it's a standard of XML file that the FDA and now other health authorities have adopted to facilitate electronic labels and electronic submissions.
Great, thank you so much. I will also add we have some great resources in our Knowledge Center. Particularly, we have a past webinar on SPL 101 that we did, I believe in early 2023. So look for that in our Knowledge Center, or we can certainly send the link out to anyone who would be interested in learning more. So our next question is, do virtual manufacturers that own NDAs or ANDAs but use a CMO need to be responsible for the reporting, or does that fall on the CMO?
Yeah, if you want to take a shot at that one. So in this particular case, there's, from the question, I would assume that there's a contract manufacturer organization, a CMO, and also a private label distributor. So these two entities have a business relationship contract between them. In this case, the CMO is the responsible party to provide the CARES Act report. Now, let's assume that this is a human product, and in that particular case, the CMO reports the counts that they manufacture under their NDC number, and in addition to that, they also report the amounts reported to the, according to the private label distributor NDC number. And it may be that that contract manufacturer has 4 or 5. They could have multiple private label distributors under contract, each with their different branding. Now, in that particular case, the CMO just reports their NDC number for all their production. So there's one report there, but then there's individual reports for each of the private label distributors. And now in this case, a private label distributor does not hold the responsibility for reporting and submitting that CARES Act report. But we have seen, and it's not too uncommon, where the private label distributor likes to get involved with their product, and by some arrangement, hopefully it's written down and very clear to both parties. Maybe the private label distributor does go ahead and make submissions for their particular products. And that's okay. Remember, the CMO can delegate another entity to submit on their behalf. So in this case, private label distributor gets involved and makes the submission and takes care of that. So one of the things that the FDA does not want to happen is that there's duplicate reporting for the same NDC number. So you might get a report from the CMO and then also a report from a private label distributor, and now there's confusion and it doesn't accurately reflect the industry. So if that relationship exists and private label distributor actively gets involved and is delegated, make sure it's very clear, and ideally it's written down. It's something more than a napkin or a handshake or verbal wink and a nod. I would make sure that there's a legal party responsible for making that submission.
Yeah.
Now,
real quick,
one other thing I'll mention is when it comes to animal products, is a little bit different matter. This the CMO just reports for their private label distributor, one to many of those. So Andrew, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that many of those responsibilities between a CMO and a private label distributor, the best practice is to identify the regulatory responsibilities and who's doing what within a formal quality agreement between those two entities. So you can know who's handling the CARES Act reporting, who's performing the annual recertifications of all the drug products, so that there's no confusion between the CMO and that private label distributor or virtual entity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. The listing, there's other reports. Sometimes a private label distributor gets involved, but again, let's make sure it's clear, clearly assigned to the particular agency and or entity that is doing the listing and annual certifications, and now we have the CARES Act report annual events. So, Aaron, do we have time for another question?
I'm hoping we can sneak maybe 2 in, Gary, because I see 2 here that I think the audience would really benefit from. So the first one here is there a validation process from FDA that looks at all of the information in the CSV file upon upload and ensures that the data is loading correctly?
Yeah, there is a step when you do make a submission. The FDA performs validation using their business rules, and results are communicated actually back to an email. Yeah, in those particular results, hopefully it's clear to the parties. That's one area that RETEC can, first of all, preclude. We're aware of those particular business rules and apply them at the time of building the actual report. So when we build the CSV file, go through some validation. There's some, special rules about innermost and outermost, and there's some rules about kits, and a lot of nuanced things that get applied. So RETEC applies that set of business rules beforehand so that the submission is relatively error-free. But yeah, there will be an ultimate check from the FDA upon submission, and then you can do some validation on the portal as well. But the final report has to go through all the business rules that the FDA applies.
Okay, great. So the FDA does validation, but we can do a pre-validation and make it easier on all of our customers. I love that.
Exactly. So a lot of times there's questions, if you have a straightforward product portfolio and you observed all the, the guidelines and definitions for the fields and so on, and understanding that is a challenge. So RETEC does offer that help in making sure, and then we do that pre-check before we actually do the submission.
Great, thanks, Gar. Okay, and our final question is actually about our single source for drug products platform. And the question here is, if a client signs up for a single source for drug products, are they able to make all of their FDA submissions from within that platform?
Great question. So single source for drug products specializes in managing SPL, structured product labeling, submissions or documents. So the electronic submission functionality in single source is unique to facilitate the submissions of the SPL submissions specifically to the OC, the Office of the Commissioner, which is the FDA center that processes, validates, and accepts all the SPL type submissions.
Great. Okay, well, I think that about wraps us up. If you did ask a question that was very specific to your scenario, we will certainly have one of our experts reach out to you sometime this week and get you an answer to that. We appreciate everyone for joining our webinar today. We like to do these once in a while and just give some extra special care to our customers. So hopefully this was really beneficial for you all. And Gary and Andrew, thank you for providing your expertise. And we will see everyone next time. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a great